I had been looking forward to Thanksgiving all year, the chance to come home, see my family, and share a meal filled with laughter, love, and tradition. The months leading up to that crisp November evening had been marked by hope and anticipation. I imagined the familiar smells of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie, the warmth of crowded rooms filled with familiar faces, and the comforting rhythm of old stories retold around the table. But as I pulled up to the house, the air felt thick with tension and unspoken words, like a heavy fog settling over what should have been a warm reunion. The house I'd once called my sanctuary now seemed foreign, its windows dark and unwelcoming, as if the warmth inside had been replaced by a cold silence that echoed louder than any laughter. I stepped onto the porch, heart pounding with a mix of excitement and unease, and rang the doorbell, each chime sounding louder in the still night. Seconds stretched into an agonizing pause before the door finally opened, but it wasn't my husband who greeted me. Instead, it was his stepfather, a man I barely recognized, his expression cold, guarded, and unreadable, like a sentry holding the gates to a fortress I no longer belonged to. Before I could utter a word, he stepped decisively in front of me and locked the door behind me, the metallic click echoing like a verdict, as if sealing me out of a life I thought was mine, and trapping me in a place that felt less like home and more like a prison. "Where's Jason?" I demanded, forcing steadiness into my voice despite the shock and growing fear curling deep in my chest. He looked at me with a chilling mix of disdain and indifference, his eyes hard and unyielding, giving nothing away. "Gone," he said simply, his tone final and dismissive. "He left days ago." The words hit me like a freight train, crashing through every hope I had held onto, shattering the fragile illusion of family and security. My husband, the man I trusted, the father of my children, was gone, vanished without warning or explanation, and the man standing between me and my home was the one who held the keys, both literal and figurative, to my family's fate that night. The stale air and cold, uninviting walls wrapped around me, tightening like a noose as the reality sank in. I was trapped in a place that should have been a refuge, but had transformed into a cage. My phone had no signal, the windows were locked tight. The stepfather's gaze was unrelenting, a silent warning that I was not welcome here. Panic threatened to rise like a tidal wave, threatening to consume me. But beneath it, a fierce determination took root and began to burn fiercely in my veins. I wasn't going to be locked out of my life, my children's lives, or my family's story without a fight. This was the night everything changed. The moment when desperation became action, fear transformed into strength, and a Thanksgiving meant for celebration became the first step in reclaiming my family and myself from the shadows of betrayal and loss. A night etched forever in my memory as the beginning of a new, hard-fought chapter of resilience, courage, and unyielding love. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the cold reality of the situation set in like an unforgiving winter chill. I stood in the entryway, the familiar walls that once echoed with laughter, now feeling like the stone walls of a fortress built to keep me out. My husband was gone, and his stepfather, someone I barely knew, held the power to decide whether I could even step further inside the home I thought was mine. I tried to steady my breathing, fighting the surge of panic threatening to overwhelm me. "Why am I locked out?" I asked, my voice trembling but resolute. The stepfather's eyes narrowed. "Jason's not here anymore. He left you." "Left me? How could he?" I whispered, shock mingling with disbelief. I thought of the countless plans we'd made, the holidays we'd dreamed about, the family we'd built together, and now it was all crumbling. Desperation gnawed at me, but I refused to show weakness. I pulled out my phone. No signal. I searched for an escape, a way to call someone, anyone, but the house seemed designed to keep me isolated. I paced, every creak of the floorboards echoing my rising fear. Then came the realization. I wasn't just locked out of a house. I was locked out of my life. Memories flooded me. The first time I held our child, the nights we stayed up worrying and laughing, the shared hopes for the future, and now they felt distant, almost unreal. I needed answers. I needed to find Jason. I demanded to speak with him, to hear his voice, to understand why he had disappeared without a word. But the stepfather's responses were curt, dismissive. "He's not coming back. You'll have to deal with that." The words felt like a slap, but they ignited a fire within me. I wasn't going to accept this abandonment quietly. I was going to fight for my family, for my children, and for myself. With no phone signal and the stepfather's watchful presence, I had to get creative. I remembered the small window near the kitchen and the loose latch I'd noticed on my last visit. Crawling carefully, I managed to slide it open just enough to slip a hand outside and signal for help. A neighbor noticed and called the police, who arrived quickly, their presence breaking the suffocating silence. The stepfather tried to protest, but the officers insisted I be let inside to check on the children and assess the situation. Inside, I found the house eerily quiet. My children's rooms were empty. Jason had taken them, or worse, hidden them away. Panic surged anew. I made calls to family, friends, and eventually a lawyer, assembling a team to help me navigate the nightmare unfolding around me. Each conversation fueled my determination. I wasn't just a victim, I was a mother, a wife, and a fighter. And I would do whatever it took to bring my family back together. This was the beginning of a battle for love, truth, and justice. A fight that would test every ounce of my courage. Days stretched into a relentless blur of frantic phone calls, endless legal consultations, and sleepless nights haunted by worry and uncertainty. The emptiness of the house pressing down on me like a physical weight, a constant reminder of the chaos Jason had left behind in his sudden disappearance. That wasn't just a betrayal, but a carefully calculated move designed to control and manipulate. With his stepfather acting as the unforgiving gatekeeper, standing firmly between me and my children, blocking every attempt to reconnect and forcing me into a battle I never anticipated. Every conversation with lawyers, family members, and friends peeled back more layers of deception and cold strategy, revealing that Jason had secretly moved our kids out of state without my knowledge, filed for temporary custody behind my back, and left me drowning in mounting bills and a flood of unanswered questions, a crushing weight of isolation threatening to break me. Yet beneath it all, a fierce fire of determination ignited within me, fueling a refusal to be sidelined, erased from my children's lives, or written out of the story of our family that I was determined to protect, no matter the cost. I sought out and hired a lawyer who specialized in family law and domestic disputes, someone who understood the nuances and high stakes of this battle, and together we began the grueling process of filing emergency custody motions and demanding the court intervene on behalf of my children and me. Navigating a legal system that felt like an intimidating labyrinth filled with obstacles and delays, but with every step forward, I grew more confident and resolute in my fight, leaning heavily on friends who became my lifeline, driving me to appointments, offering words of encouragement during late-night calls, and stepping in to care for the children when visits were finally allowed, all while learning to balance fierce advocacy with patience and grace, understanding that this fight wasn't just about winning, but about protecting the fragile bonds that held our family together amid turmoil. My children's well-being was the unwavering light guiding me through the darkness, and I focused every ounce of energy on creating a safe, nurturing environment for them when they were with me, filling our home with love, laughter, and a steady rhythm of stability despite the chaos swirling around us. Gradually, the walls that Jason and his stepfather had tried to build between us began to crumble, the court hearings bringing challenges and setbacks, but also moments of clarity and justice as evidence of Jason's abandonment, financial neglect, and manipulation surfaced, steadily turning the tide in my favor. Though the stepfather's hostility intensified, so did my resolve, for I wasn't merely fighting for custody, I was fighting for truth, respect, and the right to be a mother in every sense of the word. One evening, as I sat with the children after a school recital, their laughter filling the room with a warmth no hardship could extinguish, I realized something profound. Despite everything we had endured, we were still a family. Not perfect, not untouched by pain, but bound together by a love so fierce that no betrayal could sever it. And that night, as I watched them sleep, I whispered a solemn promise to myself and to them, that no matter what lay ahead, I would stand strong, fight fiercely, and never allow anyone to tear us apart, because the bond we share is unbreakable, forged through every trial and every victory, and that love would be the foundation on which we rebuild our lives, no matter the storms that come. The fight to reclaim my family's future was grueling and relentless. Court dates piled up, each bringing new challenges, confrontations, and moments that tested my resolve. Jason's legal team was aggressive, attempting to paint me as unstable, unfit, and out of control. The stepfather, too, wielded influence, trying to intimidate friends and family into silence or allegiance. But I was prepared. With every attack, I fortified my case, collecting messages, financial records, witness statements, and anything that could expose the truth, hidden beneath layers of lies and manipulation. My lawyer, Michelle, became my rock, guiding me through the labyrinth of legal proceedings with a fierce dedication that matched my own. She reminded me daily that this was about protecting my children's best interests and securing a safe, loving home for them. Outside the courtroom, life was a delicate balancing act. I juggled work, childcare, and endless paperwork, often sacrificing sleep and personal time. Friends and family rallied around me, their support a vital lifeline when the weight of the battle felt overwhelming. At home, I created a sanctuary, a place filled with warmth, laughter, and normalcy amid the chaos. I cooked meals from scratch, helped with homework, and made time for bedtime stories and family game nights. My children's smiles became my motivation, their resilience inspiring me to keep pushing forward. One afternoon, after a particularly tense hearing, I found myself sitting in the park with Max and my youngest daughter, Emily. The sun was warm, the air filled with the scent of blooming flowers. We played, laughed, and for a moment the world felt whole again. Max leaned against me and whispered, "Thanks for not giving up, Mom." Those words settled deep in my heart, reminding me that every battle, every sacrifice was worth it. As the legal process unfolded, cracks began to show in Jason's facade. Evidence of his neglect, manipulation, and absence weighed heavily against him. The court ruled in my favor, granting me full temporary custody and ordering supervised visitation for Jason, pending further review. The stepfather's hold over the family weakened as more relatives and friends stepped forward to support me, no longer willing to be silent bystanders. Healing, while slow, had begun. I still had doubts and fears about the future, but with each passing day, those fears were met with a growing confidence. I was no longer a victim but a warrior, a mother fiercely protecting her children and her right to a loving family. The journey ahead would be long, filled with challenges yet unknown, but I faced it with open eyes and an unbreakable spirit. This was my story, not just of loss, but of reclaiming hope, love, and strength against all odds. The days after the court ruling felt like a fragile breath of fresh air after months of suffocating tension. Winning temporary custody was not the end. It was a hard-won milestone on a long road toward healing and rebuilding a life fractured by betrayal and abandonment. The victory in court gave me legal standing, but the emotional work had only just begun. Each morning, I woke with a renewed sense of purpose, knowing I was now the primary guardian of my children's well-being and happiness. The house, once shadowed by uncertainty and silence, slowly began to fill with warmth again. I dedicated myself to creating a nurturing environment where laughter, routine, and love could flourish despite the storm that had passed. Max and Emily needed stability more than anything. I set strict but loving routines, homework at the kitchen table, healthy dinners, and bedtime rituals that included stories and quiet talks about their feelings. I wanted them to feel safe, heard, and cherished. At school, Max's teachers noticed a positive change. His focus sharpened, his confidence grew, and he began to reconnect with friends. Emily, younger and more sensitive, clung to me at first but gradually found joy in playdates and art classes. Our home transformed into a sanctuary, a place where the scars of the past could begin to heal. Meanwhile, Jason's absence was palpable, but his attempts at visitation became more consistent under court supervision. Those visits were often awkward and strained, filled with unspoken tensions and tentative steps toward reconciliation. I remained cautious but open, always putting the children's needs first. Balancing my role as both caregiver and advocate was exhausting. The legal battles continued with hearings to finalize custody and address financial responsibilities. Michelle, my lawyer, remained my steady guide through this ongoing process, helping me prepare for court appearances, gather evidence, and strategize our next moves. Financially, the burden was heavy. Jason's sudden disappearance and lack of support had left me scrambling to cover expenses, pay bills, and provide for the kids. I picked up extra shifts, freelanced whenever I could, and budgeted with meticulous care. Friends and family pitched in, offering meals, babysitting, and emotional support, reminding me I wasn't alone. Emotionally, the journey was complex and raw. I wrestled with anger, sadness, and moments of doubt, but also with gratitude for the strength I discovered within myself. Therapy became a crucial part of my healing, a space to process pain, rebuild confidence, and cultivate resilience. One night after tucking the children into bed, I sat alone on the porch, the cool air wrapping around me like a quiet embrace. I reflected on how far we'd come, from the chaos of abandonment and locked doors to the slow rebuilding of trust and family. I realized that this story wasn't just about loss or betrayal. It was about the power of perseverance, the courage to fight for those you love, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her children. As I looked up at the stars, I whispered a promise: to keep fighting, to keep loving, and to keep building a future where my children would never feel locked out again. The months that followed the court's decision were some of the most challenging yet transformative in my life. Each day demanded resilience, patience, and unwavering dedication to rebuilding what had been torn apart. Jason's visits, now under supervised arrangements, were tentative and often fraught with tension. I saw glimpses of the man I once loved, but also the fractures caused by his choices. Max and Emily navigated these encounters with mixed emotions. Hope mingled with caution, affection shadowed by hurt. I focused on fostering open communication, encouraging them to express their feelings honestly and reassuring them of my steadfast presence. The routine of daily life became my anchor. School events, doctor appointments, homework, help, and bedtime stories filled my calendar, grounding me amid the chaos. I discovered strength I hadn't known I possessed, balancing work demands, parenting duties, and legal battles with a fierce determination. Financial pressures persisted, but through careful budgeting, additional work, and support from friends, I managed to keep our household afloat. Michelle's legal expertise remained invaluable as we prepared for ongoing court proceedings to secure permanent custody and address Jason's financial obligations. Beyond the practicalities, I embarked on a journey of emotional healing. Therapy sessions helped me process the layers of grief, betrayal, and anger, transforming pain into empowerment. I reconnected with passions and friendships that nurtured my spirit and reminded me that I was more than the trials I faced. One evening, as I watched Max and Emily play in the backyard under the fading light, laughter ringing clear, I felt a profound gratitude. Despite the hardships, we were forging a new family narrative, one defined not by abandonment or betrayal, but by love, resilience, and hope. Jason and I continued difficult conversations, sometimes collaborative, sometimes contentious, but always centered on our children's best interests. Boundaries were tested, but respect grew, paving the way for a tentative but promising future. I knew the path ahead would still hold obstacles, but with each step, I felt more empowered to shape my family's destiny. This story is not just about loss. It is about reclaiming strength, redefining love, and choosing to rise above the past. If you're walking a similar road, know that you are not alone. Your voice matters, your courage inspires, and your story deserves to be told. Share your thoughts below, subscribe for more stories of resilience, and remember, sometimes the greatest victories are born from the hardest battles. The turning point came unexpectedly during a family therapy session that felt more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. Jason and I sat across from each other, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Our children, Max and Emily, watched silently, their eyes reflecting a mix of hope and wariness. The therapist, a compassionate woman named Sarah, guided the conversation with gentle firmness. She encouraged us to speak, not as adversaries but as parents, bound by a shared love and responsibility. Jason finally broke the silence, admitting the mistakes that had driven us apart, the lies, the selfish choices, and the years of neglect. His voice trembled with regret, but there was a raw honesty I hadn't heard before. I responded not with anger, but with clear boundaries and an unyielding demand for accountability. I laid out what I needed for our family to heal: consistency, honesty, and respect. Not just words, but actions. The children joined in, their small voices powerful reminders of what truly mattered. Max spoke about feeling invisible and forgotten, while Emily shared her fears of losing the family she once knew. Those moments broke through the walls of resentment and pain, revealing the fragile threads of connection still holding us together. Outside the therapy room, life continued its relentless pace. Jason worked to rebuild trust, attending parenting classes, and proving his commitment through daily actions. I continued to balance work and motherhood, finding strength in the routines that kept us grounded. Financial stability improved gradually, allowing us to create a home filled with laughter and security rather than tension and uncertainty. Our social circle expanded as friends and family saw the changes unfolding, offering support and celebrating small victories with us. Yet, healing was not without setbacks. There were days filled with doubt, moments of frustration, and fears that the past would repeat itself. Each challenge became an opportunity to reinforce our commitment to growth and forgiveness. One quiet evening, as I watched Max and Emily playing together in the yard, I felt a deep sense of peace. The scars of our journey remained, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they served as reminders of our resilience and the power of love to mend even the deepest wounds. If you faced similar struggles, know that healing is possible. It requires courage, patience, and the willingness to embrace both vulnerability and strength. Share your story in the comments, subscribe for more tales of survival and hope, and remember, you are not alone. The final chapter of this journey wasn't marked by a dramatic reconciliation or a fairy tale ending, but by the quiet, steady rebuilding of a family that had been tested and found its way back from the brink. Months turned into a year, and with each passing day the bonds between Jason, Max, Emily, and me grew stronger, not because the past was forgotten, but because it was acknowledged, faced, and worked through. We celebrated small victories: Max's first soccer goal, Emily's school play, family dinners where laughter finally outweighed tension. The wounds remained, subtle but real, reminding us of the journey that shaped us. Jason's commitment to being present and accountable never wavered, and I learned to accept that healing is imperfect, a continuous process rather than a destination. We established traditions that honored both old memories and new beginnings. Thanksgiving meals where everyone had a seat at the table, vacations that prioritized connection over perfection, and quiet moments of gratitude for the resilience that carried us through. Through it all, I held fast to the truth that had guided me from the moment I was locked out that cold November night. My worth was never defined by another's actions, but by my own strength, love, and determination. If my story resonates with you, know that you are seen and supported. Share your thoughts below, like and subscribe if this journey touched you, and remember that even in the darkest moments, there is hope. You have the power to reclaim your life, rebuild your family, and create a future rooted in truth and love. Because sometimes the most profound transformations happen not in grand gestures, but in the steady, unyielding choice to keep showing up for yourself and those you love.